Today, we're digging into a story about a pipeline, a government, and a political move so strange, so completely illogical, it just makes you shake your head. Let's get right into it.
Okay, just try to make sense of this. A government signs this huge landmark energy deal. They call it a top national priority. A few days go by, and the opposition puts forward a motion in Parliament to support that deal, using the government's own words from the agreement. So what happens? The government votes no. You heard that right. It's the kind of thing that makes you wonder, what on earth is going on?
And get this isn't some kind of political spin or interpretation. That's a direct quote from the deal they themselves just signed. They literally voted against their own talking points. From any common sense point of view, it makes absolutely zero sense. It's like watching a government fight itself with the whole country just stuck watching from the sidelines.
So let's try to unpack this first part of the puzzle, what a lot of people started calling a truly bizarre betrayal of their own signature policy. Now, the deal itself was pretty straightforward. It was an agreement to finally build a pipeline to get Canadian energy over to markets in Asia. Break our dependency on the United States. Proponents were saying it would create jobs, boost national security, the whole 9 yards. It was supposed to be a huge moment. So why the bizarre flip-flop? Well, the answer to that question seems to start out on the coast.
And bam. Immediately, this wall of opposition just goes up. A group called the Coastal First Nations basically declared all-out war on the project. Their president didn't mince words. They were going to use every legal tool in the book to kill this thing. Now, that was the public face of the opposition. But as we're about to see, the strings were being pulled from somewhere else entirely. See, when you start to peel back the layers here, a much more complicated picture starts to emerge. And it's a picture that involves a lot of money, and not all of it is Canadian. It's time to follow the money. This is really the million-dollar question, isn't it? Or maybe the billion-dollar question. When you see a campaign this organized, this loud, you have to ask, where's the cash coming from? Is this really just a local grassroots thing, or are there much bigger forces at play? Well, an official public inquiry in Alberta decided to look into that exact question, and what they found is, well, it's staggering. Between 2003 and 2019, $1.28 billion in foreign funding poured into Canadian environmental initiatives. Now, not all of that was for quote-unquote anti-energy campaigns, but it just shows you the massive scale of foreign money trying to influence Canadian policy.
And when the investigators started tracing that money, some very familiar, very powerful, and very American names started to pop up. We're talking about foundations like Tides and the Rockefeller Brothers Fund. American billionaires identified as key funders for the very groups trying to shut down Canadian energy. This isn't just some local protest, it's a massive, internationally funded machine.
And listen, this isn't speculation or some conspiracy theory. Researchers dug up the actual strategy documents, like this one from the Tides Foundation, which laid out a crystal-clear plan. Their goal, which they adopted with other huge U.S. foundations way back in 2008, was to landlock Canadian oil by specifically targeting the tar sands and stopping any new pipeline from ever being built. They wrote it down.
And this right here, this is the heart of the whole conflict. On one side, you've got the activists talking about sacred responsibilities. On the other, you have an elected leader from the exact same region, Ellis Ross, a former chief of the Haisla Nation. And he sees right through it. He calls them what they are, professional protesters using foreign cash to divide communities for their own benefit, who will ultimately leave the actual locals penniless. And that brings us to the side of the story that often gets completely buried, the huge number of Indigenous leaders who are actually fighting for development. I mean, for leaders like Crystal Smith, the elected chief counselor of the Haisla Nation, these projects aren't about destroying anything. They're about building something, building economic independence, breaking these horrible cycles of poverty, and creating a future where their own communities are powerful and self-sufficient. This is a story of empowerment, not victimhood.
And man, this quote just cuts right to the bone. This is the painful reality. For them, every single project that gets blocked isn't some victory for the environment. It's another chance to escape poverty that's been destroyed by outsiders. It's a rejection of their own efforts to break free from a welfare system that they feel completely trapped in.
This deep frustration has actually led to a powerful new term to describe what's happening: eco-colonialism.
So what is eco-colonialism? Well, you could say it's a new name for a very old game.
It's when these wealthy, often foreign-funded environmental groups come in and impose their own values on indigenous communities. They campaign to turn traditional lands into pristine parks, locking up all the resources and trapping the local people in a cycle of economic dependency. Sound familiar?
Bob McLeod, who was the premier of the Northwest Territories, he just nailed it. He pointed out this incredibly patronizing view these activists have. Indigenous people are only seen as good stewards of the land as long as they agree not to touch it. The second they want to build an economy for themselves, suddenly they're the bad guys. That, he says, is eco-colonialism.
And you can just feel the resentment here. This statement came from a coalition of 35 pro-development indigenous communities, and it is scathing. They see these outside activists as elitists from big cities who just parachute in with zero understanding of their culture or their daily struggles, all while their people are suffering.
Okay, so let's connect the dots and look at the bigger geopolitical picture. Researcher Vivian Krauss, who spent years tracking all this foreign funding, she lays out the endgame. A successful no-tanker campaign on Canada's west coast has one major economic result. It landlocks Canadian oil. It ensures that the United States stays our only real customer and lets them keep their monopoly.
And this fits into a much broader pattern of what you could call nationalist economic anxiety. The U.S. seems to have a pretty clear approach with Canada. They want our raw resources, like oil, flowing south at a discount. But the moment Canada tries to build up its own industries, manufacturing steel or aluminum, we get slammed with tariffs and trade punishments. It's a strategy that basically keeps Canada in the role of a resource colony.
So all of this brings us right back to that central conflict, to a really fundamental question of legitimacy. Who really gets to speak for whom?
The entire debate really just boils down to these questions. You have two completely opposite stories. One story says this is a noble, grassroots fight to save the planet, led by brave indigenous advocates. The other story says this is a slick, foreign-funded campaign designed to cripple a strategic Canadian industry, led by activists who are undermining the will of democratically elected local leaders.
And that really leaves us with one final, pretty provocative thought. In these incredibly complex situations where a community is itself divided, who should we be listening to? Who actually has the legitimate authority to make a decision that's going to affect generations of people? Is it the activist who's backed by millions of dollars from outside organizations? Or is it the chief who's actually elected by the very people who have to live with the consequences? It's a question that really challenges the entire foundation of this whole debate.